historic district. So everybody on the, say, West Broad Street between a certain area is in a historic district. Some of those properties are contributing, some of those properties are not contributing. A lot of those restrictions, will that help? Sorry. It's going to fly off in a minute anyway. So a lot of those properties, you know, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what you can do with your property, what, you know, being on the historic district limits you to do. Yeah, there might be some things that you need to check with the Historic Landmark Committee about, but those are typically, like I said, this is voluntary. If you want to put a bathroom on your front porch, I'm not going to like it. No, your neighbors aren't going to like it, but at the end of the year, if you meet all the zoning requirements, regular building requirements, then you can go ahead and do that, unless you accept federal money. And that's where you will actually sign deed restrictions. But you have to accept money from the federal government for a grant, which I think I've told y'all before. I've written 2 grants for properties in West Broad Street. That one of them's mine. I'll be accepting that federal money, and I'll be agreeing that I will not make changes to my property that are not appropriate and have not been approved by the South Carolina Archives and History. That's a different matter. Nobody else but those 2 properties in Darlington are going to accept federal money. But the benefit, and for those of you who are living in that area, is because I was already on the National Register, I automatically qualified to apply for that grant. So when a hurricane comes by and damages your property and you can't be made whole by insurance or, you know, whatever it is, then if the federal government offers those grants again, then you're automatically eligible. If, you know, if you lived in, say, one of the properties on Edwards Avenue, that's not in the historic district, but they are historic homes. They certainly would qualify to be a historic district. Then you can jump through a whole lot more hoops and still have that possibility for you. But being on the National Register automatically allowed me into that program. So there are benefits for it. And
well, I guess my question is,
okay.
2 questions. Between Lisa or you, whoever can tell me, what are the benefits of being in a historic section is that, that was my understanding originally, that if somebody wants to get federal funding or funding, they can get it. Some of the disadvantages would be, now I've got to go ask you, or ask the authority permission of what type of shutters or what type of windows I can put in my home or whatever, that nature to that point. So this house that the lady that's no longer with us, that he's over in charge of, if he sells it as a non-historic home compared to selling it as a historic home, what are the advantages or disadvantages?
So should be getting more money if it is valued as a historic home, because historic homes that are kept up have an increased value. I have a list of comments to answer the questions that were made, but I'd like the rest of the public to ask the questions first.
Mr. Mayor, just for a point of clarification, and as far as Mr. DeVos,
yes, sir.
I'm not doubting what he said as far as the heirs go, but I have a signed document here. This was City of Darlington petition for inclusion in historic districts, signed by Irene Kerrigan on April 3rd, 2017. She signified that she wanted to be in a historic district.
May I comment? I appreciate having seen that, because I was told it might be there, but that was 5 years ago, and all of her wishes now are expressed in her will. And so she talked to me about handling her will as much as 5 years ago, and never mentioned it to me, never mentioned it to her attorney. So I appreciate that, and that may have been.
Her will specifies now that she doesn't want to be in.
No. Once she has a will, that becomes what her legal.
But you say it specifies in the will that she didn't.
No, there's nothing in the will that she never discussed it with me. But I'm just suggesting that was 5 years ago, and that has no bearing necessarily on what this body does today. I'm the legal representative for the property. The will, had she wanted to include that in the will, yes, she could have. She did not. So I think that's the counter argument, that If it had been something that was of significant importance to her,
I'm saying, but in the will, she didn't specify yes or no.
that's correct, and she could have, she did not. So I would suggest to you that means that it wasn't of that paramount importance. And also I would suggest that it's a high-density residential area. I don't know, hey, but you're gonna put a historical overlay on a high-density residential area, so presumably, in fact, whether it increases value of historical district does or doesn't, that's all speculation. Thank you.
Mayor.
Mr. Bose, just for purposes of the record, what is your profession?
Well, I am an attorney. I am licensed by the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm currently in active status because I don't live there and practice there anymore. I'm a licensed attorney in good standing with South Carolina. I do not practice, have not practiced here. I've been a member since 2007. So it's not something that I actively engage in, but that's my background.
But I'm just asked that question because when you bring us statutes, you're bringing us statutes that you as an attorney have checked on.
Yes, sir, that's correct. And I don't say that my analysis is gospel. It's just my good faith representation to this body.
This is you want to talk before, Mr. Clark?
Just to the last point that Mr. DeBose made about it being R6 zoning district, the historic district does not dictate the zoning district or designation of a property. There are properties that are zoned industrial that are historic. There are properties that are core commercial that are zoned core commercial that are historic. So those are two separate issues, and this does not, affect the other.
All right, Dr. Clark?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Barry Clark. I live at 210 Cashel Street. We've now owned this house since 2006. I've seen the opportunity come and go for Cashel and Oak Street to come into the historic district. I now rise in strong support of that desire to occur. I think one of the single greatest things that we can do is preserve and protect our heritage and our town. And currently I'm seeing an encroachment upon our town in such a way that my fear is that our houses will be torn down. They'll be made in parking places. We've already seen that occur. We've actually seen whole streets taken up to allow that to occur. My fear is that if this doesn't pass, if y'all fail to help us protect our town, that corporate entities such as Genesis will come in and tear down that sweet lady's house, who in 2017-15 decided that she didn't want her house sold to a corporate entity that may tear that house down.
My question is that if it is, if that becomes a historic house, can it not become a parking lot?
Your Honor, it's currently zoned for high-density residential. Presumably, I don't know what kind of historical designation you have for townhouses, but that's the way it's zoned for now. So I don't know, and it's not like we're not in Washington D.C. where we have 200-year-old townhouses and they would be historical. I don't know what the overlay does. I still would argue you don't have the authority either, but that be that as it may.
Lisa?
In regards to that question, R6 does not just allow townhouses, single-family homes are also allowed. There are other uses that are allowed on the zoning district of R6. There is a very lengthy chart that goes into that detail. None of that matters. This is not changing the zoning district at all.
If we make it, that's what I'm saying, if we make it historic,
If
it's
you
still
make it
R6.
historic, it can still have townhouses or any other use that is permitted
That's what I'm
by
saying.
R6.
I'm saying, if it's classified, if it becomes classified as historic, either way, it could still become a parking lot or if it's rezoned.
Correct. Well,
And R6
depending on
could-
how much, I don't know the exact dimensions of the parcel to tell you how much parking you could put there. I have a feeling somebody could.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand their position.
But,
I
it's,
understand both sides, I understand their position right now. And you're not wanting it to become a parking lot, I understand
Uh,
that.
I
I'm
would
saying
like,
is, my
I
question
wanna
is,
see
if it
protection.
doesn't, if it didn't become, if that one was peaked out and it was a historic, or it was historic, if it becomes historic, they still can sell it to Genesis or.
They still can sell it to
or-
Genesis, and they can still turn part of it into a parking lot, and that
So that
is
still doesn't-
totally, if that is acceptable
that still
by
doesn't
our
protect.
zoning, that is fine. This historic designation merely is gonna protect them from tearing down the house, which, if excluded, and only over a certain time period would it, keep it from being destroyed. That designation, excluding it from the district, knowing that Spot Mazingo, who has such history in the state of South Carolina, that was his house. How can you exclude that history from the historic district if you're gonna make a historic district?
I said that by making it an historic area, that house, it would prevent it from becoming parking.
Well, it prevent you from tearing the house down.
Tearing the house down.
It would
What
limit,
That's pretty much all that it would prevent you from
it
doing.
would still be developable, it would just limit the parameters of development. It would curtail future uses. which
It would have
further
to
develop.
maintain a historic appearance from the street. That is all.
Well, let me, and just listening at everything everybody's saying, the one thing that struck out to me, even if it's a historic district, it is, as far as the residents, the individual one, is volunteer. Is that
All of
correct?
them.
So they still have to agree to be.
Yes, ma'am. And I think that the
And
issue that has
so
come up
Kind
here
of eliminate, okay, go ahead.
is that, and I'm sorry to step on your time, but, the issue here is that this was started in 2016, 2017 by the Historic Landmark Commission. It was brought to this council in 2018 and dropped.
Gotcha.
There was no reason for it to be dropped. And now here we are 4 years later and it still hasn't been done. And Miss Kerrigan may have been under the impression that it already happened. And we can't know that.
I can speak to that.
Oh, I didn't know you could talk to the dead.
Your Honor, I don't think we need to put up with comments like that. I've spoken with my aunt a number of times over the years. When she asked me to be her personal representative, she put it in her will. She knows that I was an attorney. We had discussions on numerous occasions. In no time did she ever mention the historic property, and she did entertain possibility of offers. I've seen that specific offers from other potential buyers that would not, in my view, would fit under this designation. So it can't have it both ways. It either does something, puts restrictions on it like the state code says, or it doesn't. If it doesn't, you don't need it. If it does, then I'm asking as a representative for the property that it be taken out. I do think, again, there's been no contrary address to the state code and whether it allows it.
Well,
I think it does not in this particular case. Thank you.
Okay, just a second.
go ahead,
Mr.
Mr.
Clark.
Clark.
yes, just to finish my comments, I would just ask respectfully that we seek to preserve and protect what we have. I've seen Florence basically become a ghost town for their historic area. And my concern is that if we allow commercial encroachment to continue in the way that it has, that we too will suffer that same fate.
Is your house in the historic?
I am in a historic district, and I actually grandfathered in 109 Columbian Street. We erased that property line legally and grandfathered that house into the historic district. And I would say that a historic district is more than just the ability to sell off your land. We went through great pains over 3 years to restore our house. And when there was a dispute regarding the fence being built, et cetera, we had a cease and desist placed on us by the city and the county that we had to await going before the historic commission or historic council to basically get that adjudicated and get that right. And we accepted that and waited 3 months of off time to do that. So there's more than just simply, okay, you can sell off this parcel to whoever you wish and it can become a parking lot in a historic designation. You have to, basically a historic house you have to have the responsibility of owning a historic house. And that means maintaining it and taking care of it, and that's what you accept when you accept that house. So, thank you for listening to me. And regarding, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Lisa?
Is that everyone for the public comment?
Ms. Latham?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I guess my first question is, what drove this need to have this type of hearing outside of the regular council meeting? Was there some huge sense of urgency? I know, Mayor, you're all about transparency and making sure the entire town is informed.
No emergency in my part.
John, I guess, because there was other questions about, as to why we needed to do it now. Why we had to have a special council meeting.
Lisa?
I'll answer that question.
Oh, okay.
This has been put off since 2018. There have been at least 3 property owners die. And their wishes were to be in the historic district. Are we just gonna wait out till everybody's dead so that the personal representatives can say that, oh, they didn't ever mention that to me, so that they were not.
To be clear, I am fully supportive.
That's just my question.
That, I was fully supportive. It's just that, I didn't get ample notice, and I don't know if everybody else in the city did. Because I think the majority of the citizens in the city of Darlington would like to see this zone as a historical district. I know the residents in our community, we are really concerned about the aggressive expansion of Genesis. And I know Howard is paid by Genesis. I know Mr. Millens is paid by Genesis. I'm hopeful that Mr. Seegers, who represents most of that, will be extremely supportive and vote in favor of this. Thank goodness when they redistrict things, I fell into Councilwoman Backus' district, and she has been extremely supportive of issues within her district and her constituency. So I'm hoping Mr. Seegers and the members that we voted at large, who represents all of us, will also vote in favor. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
So I think this might address some of Mr. DuBose's issues as well as, I'd like to remind you that there was a house, the Moody House on West Broad Street that got torn down. Mayor, you familiar with that? You probably got a lot of phone calls about it. That was a property that was in the National Register Historic District. It did not go through the proper channels to be torn down, but the point is, you can't, okay, well, it doesn't matter.
I'll document that, I'll document it in the next meeting.
Let me finish. All right, so the issue is whether or not a piece of property can be taken down that's in the historic district. The answer to that is yes, it can be. It can be demolished, it can be moved. In a situation like Ms. Kerrigan's house, if she were already in the historic district, then if Genesis or whoever buys that and wants to build the universe of condos over there, then it's possible that what we would actually do is try to find a way to preserve that house. It is the building that we are trying to preserve, and we would probably try to find another alternative to move that or something else. But at the end of the day, we can't take your property. We cannot take your property for historic purposes. That's all there is to it. And so while there are recommendations that we will make in the Historic Landmark Committee, there are other things that we will help you do, that, information and try to make you think, see alternatives. At the end of the day, if that property gets sold and turned into condos, then we can't stop that. There is a time frame. There are more hoops to jump through, but it does not prevent a property owner from doing what they want to their property. That's all there is to it. So, in my mind, there's really no reason to reject historic landmark status for any of these properties. You're not gonna prevent Genesis from coming and taking over. You're gonna make them think about it twice. You're gonna make them do a few more hoops to jump through. But at the end of the day, if they take your whole neighborhood for eminent domain, then, that's still, accepting federal money means that they have to, just like a federal contract bid, they'll ask, I've seen some of those documents. They'll ask you, even the Catawba Indians had to approve my grant to put a roof on my house. To my knowledge, there is no Indian burial ground on my roof, but they had to approve it. And so any facility, Genesis, Oak Haven, that accepts federal money, might have to have those approvals in place. Again, it's more time consuming, but it doesn't stop you from tearing your house down. Does that clarify?
Sounds good.
And so, well, for my time to clarify, because I keep getting criticized about the house on Broad Street, all the loops were taken and that house was, followed all the procedures. There's another house on Broad Street that is already looking bad. There's other houses in town that look bad, as we'd all love to buy them and fix them. So as I've encouraged the historical district and owners is to try to find people to help buy those houses so that we don't have to tear anything down, whether it's a small house, big house, or anything. So again, I'm not one for going through and tearing everything down just to make it, just to clear the land, but if it's a hazard, an eyesore, and we have a lot of them, is that they need to go. And so again, I encourage everybody to make sure that we save the historic district, because I'm 100% effort to
Well,
try to
that's
make sure that we
good,
save our historic district.
because those grant funds need historic designation for people to get those. And we are trying to get those for all those little old ladies on fixed incomes that can't afford that new roof. This is, if you vote against this, then you're blocking them from keeping their property up. So think about that. It's not, that's a bigger problem than that.
Any more discussion? Lisa?
Just a few more comments to answer some of the questions that were here. In your packet, you've got a copy of the map. You have a copy of the ordinance. In terms of some of the legal questions,